Welcome to the Friendly Moms Club podcast with Jen and Karlee. We're the new mom friends you didn't know you needed.
We are creating a safe space to bring moms together, lighten the heaviness, and find joy in the everyday moments. Together, we will share our own experiences of being new moms while navigating the topics we wish more people talked about.
Join us every Monday to hear us skip the small talk and dive right into the uncomfortable. Happy Mom Day, Jen.
Happy Mom Day, Karlee.
It's an ugly day.
It's a fun day because we have a special
day.
guest on today, Rachel Fritz, and she is the founder of Parenting on Mars. So we're going to talk all about parenting, including like secure attachment, gentle parenting, kind of some of the controversial or scary things that is out there on the internet world. So we're excited to dig into them.
We're going to talk about all those parenting buzzwords and what they mean, and do you need to follow them? Yeah, we had some really good takeaways from this, that after the episode, we both felt like a little bit more able to parent.
Less scared.
And we just felt reassured that, you know what, we're doing the dang thing and we're doing okay. We don't need to be perfect. And anyways, I don't want to give away any spoilers.
Rachel's very sweet. She's non-judgmental, and yeah, she's very educated. She has a master's in education. She worked with the nonprofit education system, a preschool teacher, and now she does parenting coaching. She has a coaching certification in parenting, actually. So we will link all of her, her website, her socials down below if you want to check her out. And she was recently on Daytime Chicago. So I'm going to link the link to her little interview with them too, which is fun.
Yeah, I think it's important to say too, she also has 3 kids of her own. So, she's in the trenches with us. And she also, she talks a little bit about her experience with postpartum anxiety and depression and how that kind of changed her parenting.
So hopefully you like it. Yes, so.
Yeah.
So hopefully you like it. And I don't
we have nothing to say.
And here we go.
Yeah. Here's Rachel.
We are here today with Rachel Fritz, and we are very excited to have you on the podcast today, Rachel. So welcome.
Welcome. We're going to talk about something a little controversial today, and that is parenting and parenting styles. I'm sure you've heard about gentle parenting. Yeah, we're going to get into it. So, Rachel, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
I'm Rachel Fritz. I'm a parenting coach. So I live in Chicago, Illinois. I have 3 kiddos of my own, 8, 5, and 3. I have spent my career before this one in nonprofit education. I was a preschool teacher for a few years with Teach for America, and then worked for that national education nonprofit for almost a decade after that. And then, did what I think a lot of moms do, sometimes because they have no choice, but sort of look at how is my career fitting into, my family life. And I took a step back and looked at, what do I really enjoy? What do I really love doing? What do I feel like I do really well? And honestly, that answer was parenting. I tell people I'm a parenting enthusiast. Yeah. And so it kind of led me down this path.
Amazing. And you also, so you worked at a preschool, but you also have a master's in, is it childhood education or?
Early childhood education.
In early childhood education. Masters, they're no joke.
We are both in that, after you have your first child, we're both in that introspective, does our career fit in with our lives moment. So you talk about that and we're we feel that because we are both in those thoughts right now. So that's interesting that that's how you worded it, because it is. You have children and all of a sudden you're rethinking.
Yeah, your whole life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, your whole life changes.
So let's just kind of get into the nitty gritty of parenting. And I think one of the big things that people talk about when we go into parenting is attachment or attachment theory and kind of gentle parenting. But maybe we can start with attachment. What is the attachment theory and secure attachment?
Yeah, absolutely. So attachment theory is essentially considering the relationship and the bond between 2 human beings, and particularly when those humans are in very long-term relationships, right? So a caregiver and a child, a parent and a child, romantic relationships, you have an attachment style, and you build an attachment style with that person. And so when we think about attachment theory and attachment science when it comes to raising kids, it's the way that relationship forms and the way that it feels and the health of that relationship between those two people. So I talk a lot about building a secure attachment. So a secure attachment is when a child has a relationship with a caretaker or a parent where they feel that they are safe, that their needs are met, that they're soothed when they're upset, they're picked up when they're crying. It's a parent that is very attentive to the child's needs and their development and their emotional state. It's a book that I love. I have it in my lap right now because I reference it a lot, but it's The Power of Showing Up, and it's by Dr. Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. They also wrote The Whole Brain Child, which is a very popular like parenting book and child development book. But what they say is that there are 4 sort of S's when it comes to building a secure attachment. A child feels seen, secure, soothed, and safe. So that's sort of what encompasses like the way that a parent shows up in that way leads to the attachment style, essentially. And then if we're looking at something outside of secure attachment, we're looking at insecure attachments. And, we can get into all of that, but there are about 3 that we focus on in attachment science in that regard. The reason why building a secure attachment is so important is because research and like mounds of research has shown that is the best predictor of a person having a fulfilled, meaningful, happy, successful life. And in lots of different regards, right? In academics, in their interpersonal relationships, with their relationship with themselves, the ability for them to find inner safety when they encounter like stress and distress. And so that's like why this matters. And the research has also shown that secure attachment needs to be with at least one caregiver, right? So a lot of times we get questions about like, well, what if two parents have different parenting styles? That happens, right? Like that happens. And in order for the person, the child, to gain most of those benefits of a secure attachment, it needs to be with at least one adult.
So they need the one parent. And when you talk about attachments in any long-term relationship, can you have one attachment with one relationship and one with another, or do you just have one attachment type and it carries over to all of your long-term relationships?
So the answer is yes, kind of yes, both and, right? Or when we think back, and this is what I do a lot with my clients, when we think back to our own childhood and our own upbringing, and we make sense of our own attachment style with our parents, oftentimes what we find is that, we might say, I have a secure attachment, but I also see these like pieces of like avoidant attachment or, disorganized attachment, or I have this like avoidant attachment with like my father and a secure attachment with my mother, or vice versa. So yeah, that happens because like it's really hard to just fit really neatly into one category because we're humans. We're not perfect. And so that's very, very common to see as well.
Okay.
I guess, so if you had a secure attachment with your parents, or I guess I should go the opposite. If you had an insecure attachment with your parents, it's still possible to have a secure attachment with your child. You just have to put effort into that, right? Like, yeah. We love therapy, so we're big fans of that. But so it's possible to look at your own, reflect back and be like, okay, so I didn't have a secure attachment. How can I build this with my child?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what in a lot of, in therapy or even when it comes to like parenting styles, we talk about like cycle breakers, right? And we talk about generational patterns and how you can break generational patterns. One thing that I think a lot about, and this is like, maybe a little, I don't know, maybe it's a little deep, but
let's go there.
We love that.
I think a lot about how I am where my lineage like is, right? Like there are, all these people in my family that came before me, every generation before me. And there are so many patterns that were repeated generation after generation. And that a lot of those patterns will continue, right? Like that's okay. Some of those patterns are really great. Some of them maybe not so great, but I, can only do what I can do and do the best that I can. But I'm where my lineage exists, and it's up to me to, in a way, like set the course for the generations to come after me. So that's what I think about. And then I would also just say, when it comes to this, like, oh, maybe I didn't have a secure attachment, but that's what I want for my relationship with my child. What attachment scientists have sort of concluded is that making sense of your own upbringing, your own story, is really key in that. It's called they call it a coherent narrative. And so if you can, and I've done this myself, like I've sat down and I've written for, like an hour on like how do I make sense of my upbringing and the way that I was parented? And when you do that, you start to, it's the beginning of building, or they call it an earned secure attachment, right? Like you are almost like changing, reparenting and making sense of that.
Yeah, there's lots of that. Yeah, there's lots of that out there too, like reparenting your inner child and even like healing your inner child.
I just think it's something that people don't want to do because a lot of people don't want to go back to maybe not happy memories or really have to have those thoughts, right? Like it's just, a lot of people want to just focus on forward. Like it's in the past, I'm moving on. But it's interesting that they found that it's actually key in order to break the cycle and create something. You have to really understand where you come from. It makes sense. It's
I'm feeling that a lot lately too, that wanting to, like every family has like ways that we were parented that get passed on, whether it's like you're forced to eat all your food at the table or if it's something deeper about like actually parenting. So we're all trying to like break something. And I find that for me to actually do that and make changes in how I parent, I actually have to go back to the beginning, to me as a child, things that happened, and it's not very pleasant.
Yeah.
So
I don't imagine it would.
So I mean, if we can just change that for our children, start from the beginning.
And what I would say about that, because I think that's a really great point on like a lot of people might feel like that's scary or maybe that feels like a lot of work and a lot of like laying on a couch and like getting deep into like childhood. And it could be that, right? Like it could be like really deep and messy and hard. But what I would say, so I'm not a therapist, right? Like I'm a parenting, but what I do in coaching is we look at those past patterns and we look at that stuff not to, really go deep into it, but to make the connection to the now. Mm-hmm. So you're having a reaction when your child can't sit still at the dinner table. Let's explore that. What was it like if you left the dinner table? What were dinners like for you when you were a kid? Oh, how did you feel in that moment? What did you need instead? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then parents start to make the connection of, oh my gosh, like this is why like it feels so triggering when my child can't sit still because, maybe I was punished or maybe I didn't get dessert if I didn't eat everything on my plate or if I left the table too early. So, it's a lot of it is awareness and making sense and making that connection versus you have to just like make peace with everything in your past and then feel good about it and forgive everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah,
that's
perfect. Weight off my shoulders. So to achieve or earn a secure attachment with your child and going forward, do you need to subscribe to like parenting ideologies like gentle parenting?
Gentle parenting. It's like, it's having like such a branding like crisis right now.
Yes. It's having a moment. Yes.
And it is
insane. It's kind of like this it's just like this beast that became something it was never like, I don't think supposed to be. I didn't coin the phrase. I'm not in charge of it. Like I don't think anyone really did. But what I think these parenting ideologies or these words that come up. So we have like gentle parenting, attachment parenting, transformational parenting, connected parenting, authoritarian. And what I think it's really saying, honestly, is build a secure attachment with your kid, right? Like think we're trying to sort of package it in a way and talk about it in a way where we can, kind of group things or umbrella things. If anyone has like a weird feeling or like a bad taste in their mouth around like gentle parenting, like don't call yourself a gentle parent. You don't have to, right? Like you don't have to at all. Fair. So no, I don't think you need to say like or subscribe to like one of those things. I do think as parents, it's important that we understand child development, brain development, nervous system science, attachment theory, not so that we can like, earn our PhD and like go, and do research on it, but because like that's what matters when it comes to humans developing. Like they have underdeveloped brains. It's really helpful to know, for example, that auditory processing doesn't fully develop until they're in their, mid-teens. And so when you have a 4-year-old who's not, quote, listening to you when you say, turn off the TV from the other room, it's not because they're disobedient or they're disrespectful. It's because they're just developmentally not there yet. Same thing with just like the way the brain develops from, the bottom up, and the prefrontal cortex isn't in firing all of the time, especially when kids are stressed out. That type of stuff, that awareness is really helpful when you're responding in really tough moments, because then it can help the mindset and the narrative that you have. Having a mindset of like, my kid's ungrateful, or my kid's spoiled, or my kid is disrespectful. That narrative that creates or that influences your response in the moment.
And you mentioned those 2 books earlier. Would those be a good place to start? Like for parents who are wanting to learn about these things, like what kind of is the best place for them to start?
I love those 2 books. Yeah, I would also recommend Beyond Behaviors by Mona Delahook. That is also a really, and what I think is really good about, those 3 books that I just mentioned, or that I mentioned, is that it gives you like really tangible tools and things that you can do. Other book that I love, it's called Nonviolent Communication, and it's not like a parenting book. There's a lot of parent-child anecdotes in it, but it talks about how to better communicate and communicate through conflict.
Yeah, I feel like we could all learn to do that better.
It's not really something we were taught when we were younger, because things change. Like, just like what you were saying, that we now have, well, maybe we knew back in the 80s, 90s this as well, but we know a little bit more, or we're like applying the knowledge we know about children's development and their brains and what they're actually like, what their capabilities are. Like when you're saying like, oh, turn off the TV and they're not listening, it's not that they're like, in air quotes, a bad kid or that they're misbehaving. It's because their brains like actually are not capable of that. And you either have to say it in a different way, or you need to like change the way that you deliver the message and not just yell at them louder, which I don't know about you guys, but like that's how I was parented. That's how my friends were parented. Like,
you didn't listen at this level, we'll just go up a level.
Go louder and louder and louder.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, as you like, there's nowhere to go but up, is what you're saying, right? Like you keep escalating, but in the moment. But then also, if we look at that over time, it's pretty easy for me when my child won't leave the park, like my 3-year-old, I pick him up and take him. If my 13-year-old, I don't have one yet, but like when I have a 13-year-old, I'm not going to be able to pick them up and take them. I mean, I have an 8-year-old and I can't do that with her. Let's think like it's the long game here. Not only is escalating in the moment, it might like work in the moment, but you'll have to escalate over time. And it's like, how high, like, where do you want to go? Right? Like in terms of, punishment. Yeah. And so bringing it down and really at a very young age, setting the foundation with tools to communicate, effectively, and to, build that relationship based off of respect and treating kids like humans, because they're already humans, right? Like they don't have to earn the right to like be treated like a human. And that's something that I think is very present in gentle parenting, but what it doesn't mean is being permissive. That's a whole nother misconception.
For sure. And I think something that we don't consider often with like air quotes, like traditional parenting is kind of the effect it has on the child. Like I remember growing up thinking that I was just a bad kid because I couldn't listen. And it's not that I couldn't listen, or sorry, it's not that I was choosing not to listen. It's that my brain just didn't understand the things that I was being told. So then my parents did the way that they were parented. They got louder. They said more things. Like there was more no's. And to me, I internalized it that like, well, I must be a bad kid because I'm not able to listen. And now that's something that I'm undoing and realizing like, one, they didn't know any better. This was the 80s, 90s. That's how people parented. And then also for me, it doesn't mean that I was a bad child. It just means I was a child. I was just a kid. I didn't know how to listen because my brain didn't work that way.
I also think of it as like the Band-Aid solutions. Like it doesn't actually fix anything, but sometimes in the moment you're just like, I will do anything to move on from this. So parents will like choose the easy fix. Yeah, the quick Band-Aid. I'm just going to put this over top and all is well. But when you look at it in the long term and what effects will this have, maybe you would change your course and do things a little differently.
And then maybe sometimes you do need that Band-Aid when, it's safety or whatever, or like it's a particularly bad day.
Yep.
But I think one thing that's very triggering for me with gentle parenting is that if I have a day where I yell, or if I have a day when I'm not as patient, then I can't be a gentle parent. That means automatically I'm a bad parent. And I think that's why both of us are so hesitant to like buy in, because we like the like general basis of gentle parenting, that you're learning more about the way your child's brain works and how to actually communicate to them effectively, and like how to get them to actually understand what you're saying. And there's so many different techniques we can talk about later, but I think the thing for gentle parenting is that it makes us feel guilty when we're not gentle every day and perfect.
Yeah.
And we're both recovering perfectionists.
Yeah.
So it's hard for us.
Love this. Definitely have thoughts on, kind of the perfectionist piece and the, and what's being put out there in terms of like, so if you yell, does that mean you're out of the gentle parenting club, right? Or the attachment parent, whatever it is. The answer is no. Because like we're not robots, right? No one is perfect. Thank goodness. The number one thing, and this is actually, I think, like a cornerstone of, I'm just going to say parenting in this way, right? Is that when we do mess up, how do we repair? What does the repair look like? And that is just key, not only to developing, a healthy bond with your child, apart with, a best friend, with, maybe a sibling. Repair when we mess up is paramount. And so I think that, again, going back to maybe the way we were parented, that might feel really unnatural. That might feel counterintuitive. I'm the parent. Like I can't show, maybe quote like weakness, or that I'm imperfect. But what a gift to your child to show them that, hey, one, like, I mess up too. Two, this is what an apology looks like. This is what taking responsibility for the things that, that you do wrong looks like. And I repair all the time with my kids, right? Like it happens. And guess what? Like my kids also repair with me, and I don't have to prompt. Like my 8-year-old will come up to me and say, hey, I'm really sorry about what I said earlier. Like, and then like we'll have a conversation about it. Aww. And then they'll say, I didn't appreciate those words. I accept your apology. Like, let's talk about, how is it going to look different next time. Right. And that was also something that wasn't present in my upbringing. I never went up to my parents and apologized. Like, I just was like, like, is it over? Did it blow over? Are we good?
Yeah, totally. Just hide out until it's
right?
Yeah.
Like, we haven't really said anything, but like we just moved on. So I think the imperfection, if any parents out there are consuming information around gentle parenting or, any parenting style, and, you're getting a sense of, God, this, like, I feel bad about this. Like, I feel bad about myself, or this isn't inspiring to me. Like, smash that unfollow button. Like, put the article away. Like,
yeah.
Sometimes,
definitely.
It's the difference of finding the right maybe messenger for some of this stuff too. But it kind of pains me that folks would feel like that the approach of this type of parenting is attacking, and it might be in some the way that it's being delivered in some ways, but it really shouldn't be. And we really need to make space for, everyone to be able to explore, what type of parent do I want to be what essence do I want to kind of carry as a parent, for my family? What kind of leader do I want to be? And then, using that like intention and reflection to guide how you parent.
I love that. So what you're telling me is that to be a parent who is maybe gentler and to actually work towards or like build a secure attachment, I don't have to be perfect, which is like music to my ears, and that I can make mistakes. But the important thing is actually just repairing with either your child, your spouse, whoever. I like what you said, like, I'm sorry that, I did XYZ, and acknowledging like I'm not perfect, I make mistakes too, and then like if I could go back I would have done this, or next time I'll do this, and actually taking full ownership and then like closing the loop how you would change it or go forward. And that I think the main thing is on Instagram and social media, we see these extremists for gentle parenting. And like for myself, I need to remind myself that for everything, there's people who are on all ends of the spectrum. There's people who are 100% against any kind of like attachment or gentle parenting or whatever, like the new like trendy names in air quotes. And then there's people who are like 100% for it, and they say that's the only way to parent. And then there's a lot of us kind of in the middle where we realize like we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We're just like everyday real life parents that are working on our own problems, and then also just trying to give our kids like a fighting chance. And I like that middle area because it's a lot more gentle. Attainable for sure.
Because you just want to be a good parent. Like I think that's what it comes down to. I want to do my best and be a good parent to my child and be a good example. So there's a few things is that I liked when you said about that one book that's about communication, nonviolent communication, I think you said it was. But I think it's just as important to also show what a relationship with your spouse looks like and how to treat them well. So if they do see something happen between, like, repairing those relationships and making sure that they see that, like, you want to also be a good
role model that way,
for those different relationships.
Repairing in front of them. Yeah, I've
heard a lot about that. But I just want to be a good parent. Like I just, so I think when I hear all of these different names, I'm like, it just stresses me out more. But also I struggled with a lot of postpartum anxiety. I mean, I have PTSD. And so there's just some parts that, it just was a little bit harder for me right when having a baby. And I felt like you have this kid and then all of a sudden there's this pressure. Like you go on social media and it's telling you right away you need to be perfect, where I was like, I'm dealing with anxiety. Like I'm just struggling to get any sleep to survive. How do you think when you have that like postpartum anxiety, depression, do you think that plays a part in like your ability to really make a secure attachment? Or like, I just feel like that's so hard when you just have a baby, right? To think about these things.
It is. Yeah. And, I struggled with postpartum depression and anxiety. And I was on the internet all the time, right? Like Googling all the things, looking at all the things. And I had a friend who had a baby a few months after me. So we kind of like, overlapped a little bit. I went first. And I remember her telling me at one point, she's like, I'm not going to Google anything. Like, I'm just going to ask people I know who already have a baby what their thoughts are. And at the time, I was like, what do you mean? Like, you're going to have to Google something. Like, there's no, like, and it just felt so strange to me because, I was in a dark place and I was, had a lot of obsessive tendencies when I was in that place. And when it comes to looking at parenting styles, like, we can, maybe adopt something similar to that where you don't have to, Google everything or, follow all the accounts to like get all the information. I would say if you can find someone who you think is a good parent, who maybe is a few in terms of their child's like age, and connect with them and ask them about their experiences, or find, maybe there's one person who really resonates with you on Instagram, for example, that you want to follow. Maybe you love the balance of like the humor of, this parenting thing is wild and we need to laugh about it. But I also want to know what to do when my kids are like punching each other. So be in charge of what you consume. And I think that if we all, took a little bit of time to really like be selective on some of the things that we're, viewing and watching.
That can go for anything on social media too, whether it's you're following accounts that make you feel really bad about your body. That's something we've talked about before, that like unfollowing people that talk a lot about diet culture, or they make you feel like you're supposed to, like in air quotes, bounce back. And I never really thought about it to also do the same thing for parenting, because seeing how other people parenting can be very triggering for lots of reasons, whether they are being like judgy and like elitist, or you're just triggered for whatever reason, and like it's something you're working on and you just don't need to be exposed to it. So I like that if there's
Unfollow.
Yes, unfollow. And it doesn't mean that those accounts are bad. It just might not be the right fit for you at that time. That's good. I like that. That can make everything a lot more attainable. And then also, like you said, like, for the love of God, get off Dr. Google.
Yeah.
Dr. Google he's a quack. He's
Even if you're in a bad place, and say your first 6 months you felt like you just were the worst parent and you didn't parent how you wanted, like, I guess what would you say to those parents? Like, is it too late at 6 months or a year old when you're like, I was terrible for this year, but I want to do better? Like,
is it ever too late?
Is it ever too late?
The answer is no. It is never too late. It's never too early, and it's never too late.
Perfect.
And if there are folks out there with adult children and they were like, God, I did some things that, looking back, maybe I would have done differently now, or, looking at, how my kids are, parenting their grandkids or something. I mean, God, like, could you imagine the power of like repair at that point? Even to say, you know what, like when you were a kid, I would say this to you. And I imagine that probably felt really scary and really bad. And I'm sorry. I wish I would have done better. And I want to tell you now that I realize that. I mean, right? Like mind blow, like, could you imagine, right?
Whoa.
What that could do for a relationship. So no, it is never too late. And
it's never too early. I like that you said that.
Yeah, I just like the idea that you don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to, you're going to screw up. Like, it's all about repairing, and just start when you can, where you can. Like,
I like
and
that.
You talked about this when we were talking before the podcast. Just the idea, like in our emails when we were chatting, just about that every family is different. So your approach when you're coaching families isn't just a one size fits all, do this and you're going to have secure attachment. Like, every family is different. And I love that you take into account that every family, it is different, and it might look different, how you're going to build that and what you need to work on and what things are triggering to you. And I appreciated that you said, everyone is different. There's not just a
cookie cutter.
Do X, Y, and Z and you'll be a good parent and your kids will be successful. Like, it's going to look different for everyone, and you will have to put some work in.
And kind of along those lines, like, it's got to feel authentic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I really don't like, and sometimes I'll maybe like give folks some advice around this, but I really don't like scripts. Like, there's this like trend out there where it's like, I'm going to give you the script for when your child's having a tantrum in Whole Foods. And then you go out and you're like, you're in that moment and your child's having a tantrum and you're like, shit, what was the script? And like, and then maybe you remember, maybe you don't remember it. Maybe you do remember it and you say it and it doesn't sound like you, and you don't, and it didn't work, right? Because you're still feeling like this moment is out of your hands and out of control. So it's like, throw that out the window. The way that you respond to your child, like, truly needs to come from within. And like, I also, like, as a coach, like, I don't have the answer. I can help you get to the answer because I actually believe that you, as the parent, like, your child, you have the answer. That's why, like, we can coach and I can support you without knowing your child, because I don't have to, because you do. I have to support you as the parent and help you make those connections. And it's such a good feeling when you're in a moment that maybe you've never been in before with your child, and you can feel both, oh my God, like, this is really hard, but like, I got this. And you can get through that moment because you have the tools, you have the confidence, and you know your kid, and you are communicating authentically. Like, it doesn't have to sound like, okay, honey, I know. There they are.
And it makes so much sense. You can't just learn a script and repeat after that robotically. Like, that's not going to work. Like, children can also sense so much, right? Like, how you are feeling around them. And, like, right,
Definitely.
they talk about...
They pick up on your energy. And...
What's the thing with babies?
Oh, the co-regulation.
Co-regulation. I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, that thing where they...
Yeah.
But I can see, like, if they sense what you're saying is, like, you truly believe it and it's coming from you, how much better that would sound. Or, like you said, if your parent is going to do an apology to you, if it just sounded like, I read this on the internet and I should say sorry that I was not a good dad, right? Rather than hearing them say something that feels real.
Authentic,
just how much better that would go. So I really love that you say that. Like, you can't tell them exactly what to say, but you can work on what you should do and, like, the tools to actually get there and make those decisions. Which...
Especially because so much of what you say, it's not actually what you say, but like how you say it and your body language. And so if you're reading from a script, you're going to sound very robotic and it's not going to sound authentic and loving. It's going to sound like Siri is reading it out. So I like that's good. So you got to make sure you're doing things from your heart, things you believe in. We don't have to be perfect. It's never too late. These are all very reassuring. I'm feeling less stressed.
It does. This is making me feel good.
Yeah, this is good. Can you remind us what the 4 S's are? You talked about it earlier. And these are the 4 S's to achieve secure attachment,
and these are
right?
all, like, I didn't make these up. These all come from the power of showing up, feeling seen. So my caregiver understands me and sees my experience. There's this term that I think it was Dr. Siegel came up with called mindsight. And it's the ability to, like, really like imagine yourself in the mind of another person. It's a little different from, like, empathy or sympathy, but it's, you know, that moment where, like, either with a spouse or with your child, you're like, oh, I know what you're thinking, right? It's like that.
Yeah.
So it's being seen, being understood, and being validated too, right? It's soothed. So when you are in distress, when you are in a stressful moment, your caregiver reliably shows up for you. And that's soothing. And this is, again, where I would say, like, knowing your child and the authenticity piece comes in. You know, I have 3 kids and they don't all soothe the same way. So one child, big bear hugs, right? Another child, it's like, don't touch them, right? Like, that doesn't feel good. I can still provide a soothing presence in a way that is co-regulating and soothe him and respond to his needs. The third one is safe. So a child is, you know, we think about safety in terms of, like, their physical safety and keeping them safe from harm. That is absolutely part of it and extremely important. It also relates to not being a source of harm. So are your children safe with you, right? Are you, again, nonviolent in your actions, in your words? And so keeping your child safe and not being a source of harm. I also think about this safety in terms of what they're exposed to. So if my 8-year-old decides, like, oh, I'm going to watch this, you know, this TV show, and then my toddler walks in and sees something scary, that's not safe for him. He's not developmentally at the age to consume that type of content. So it's my job to keep him safe in that situation as well. The fourth one is secure. So it's kind of like the culminating of, I guess, the 3. You're reliable. You show up consistently. You don't have to show up perfectly. There's a security there, and you are their home base, their secure base, their sturdy leader. And they can depend on you.
I love that. Thank you for summarizing that. That was good. Like the little examples too. I know we're getting close to our time, so maybe just, is there anything else that you want to kind of touch on about parent coaching, about secure attachment, things that we can work on? Like, is there anything else you think that's important for parents to really know right now?
Gosh, I mean, it's this, you know, I feel like we started in this way too. Like, it's such a big topic in terms of just the weight that it carries, but also just in terms of the information. I think there's a lot to be said for really setting your intentions as a parent and reflecting on what is the essence that I want to hold and have when I think about the type of parent that I want to be. And again, like, this is authentic. This feels obtainable for me. This feels like it fits who I am when I'm like at my best. I want to be, and I work every day to be a strong, grounded, sturdy leader for my kids. I allow them to feel their feelings deeply. I support them in that. I hold them accountable by allowing them to experience consequences when, like, as they learn and they grow. I am their teacher. I'm here to show them and teach them and be an example to them. I'm not perfect. And when I mess up, I take ownership of that and I repair with them. The words that I'm saying to them and the way that I interact with them is literally what is building their kind of inner voice and how they view themselves. And that is going to carry on well after I'm gone and be what is ever present in generations to come in my family. And so that's my motivation for, really looking at the way I parent in a serious way and also in just a very like loving and kind of forgiving way for myself.
That's beautiful. I love that.
And I heard you say you were recently on Daytime Chicago, and I listened to the little clip of it, and I liked the way that you worded it because you said that you want to create peaceful, authentic, and connected ways to parent. And I was like, I just like it. Just kind of is like a nice summary, and I liked the way that you put that. So I just wanted to share that that's how you had worded it before. But thank you so much for coming on. We loved having you on the podcast, and
it's been great.
We learned a lot, so hopefully all the listeners will learn a lot too. And
I feel less stressed.
Yeah,
I do. So tell all of our listeners, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Parenting on Mars, and on my website, parentingonmars.com.
Perfect. And then for your coaching business, if people are curious, they can just reach out on any of those, or do you prefer your website?
You can get in touch with me like through Instagram, through my website. I have a lot of avenues in which we can schedule a time for a free consultation and figure out what feels right for you.
That's awesome.
Awesome. And we will link all of your website, your Instagram, social medias to the episode. So if you're curious, also just go to the show notes and you can find it there. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.